Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we preview suddenly a very big game, an NBA Cup group play game in Detroit against the Pistons. Can the Bucks stay unbeaten and punch their ticket into the quarterfinals? Can they get there even if they lose? Camille and I dig into that coming up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of the day every day. And for your first read of the day, we encourage you to check out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. Your favorite podcast now has their own newsletter, the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it is delivered right to your inbox daily. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We have a very interesting game in Detroit tonight, Camille. The Pistons, as you know, we all drew it up when the schedule came out. 2 3-0 teams, the Bucks and the Pistons, determining who advances to the quarterfinals of the NBA Cup. Bucks have started to figure some things out. We've talked about that at length the past few shows here. And we were talking before we started recording. I know there was some, hey, is Giannis going to play? Like one of the shows that I was listening to was going with the assumption he was not and did not travel with the team. He wasn't at practice yesterday because of an illness. But as of this morning, as we tape this at roughly 8:30 Central Time, the most recent injury report that was submitted for the Bucks still has Giannis listed as probable and no mention of the illness. It's just the patella tendinopathy. So it does appear they're going to have Giannis and Damian Lillard. We're still waiting on Khris Middleton. He did give somewhat of a brief interview to Jim Ozarski I want to touch on momentarily here. But, it's tough because this is on paper, certainly not a tough matchup for the Bucks when you look at some of Detroit's metrics. But I think it's going to be tough because we've talked about this before. This is probably going to feel like a playoff game.
Yeah, Detroit's been waiting for something to play for. Like, we know this is an in-season tournament, the NBA Cup, and a lot of teams are sitting here like, it is what it is. But we've talked about the competitive nature. And for teams in certain stages of their rebuild or where they are in their life cycle, these games give young teams in particular a really good chance and experience of feeling what playing with something on for stake feels like. So it's like a playoff light game for Detroit. And Detroit hasn't been in the situation over the last few years where they've even been sniffing in the playoff race. So this is going to be a game for Detroit where they're taking it serious. They mentioned even last year for the NBA Cup, watching the Pacers against them and how the Pacers came in and just blew the doors off of the Pistons for the point differential and just how serious they took it and how that was a wake-up call for them. And they are ready for this game. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere in Detroit tonight for this game.
Yeah, the Malik Beasley revenge game possibly looming for the Pistons as well. I guess let's just start there with the matchup. We've already seen the Pistons once. The Bucks won that game. And it's a Pistons team that they started out playing pretty well and still 9-13, all things considered, for where this team was a season ago and the losing streak that they had. I think so far it's been a pretty successful season for the Detroit Pistons. But by the numbers, there's not a whole lot that they do well. What they do really excel at is rebounding the basketball. So that is certainly one thing that could determine what we see tonight. I mean, you think back to that game in Charlotte where offensive rebounds are taking the final whistle out of it. Offensive rebounds were probably the thing that doomed the Bucks the most with Moussa Diabate. Pistons do that very well. They have the 9th best offensive rebounding rate in the league, 10th best on the defensive glass, and their defense is okay. It's right around where the Bucks sit, in just a little bit better than middle of the pack. Offensively is where the struggles really lie for this team. They don't really do anything efficiently. They don't get to the free throw line. They turn the ball over quite a bit. So to me, if the Bucks protect the basketball and if they at least hold their own, you don't have to win the rebounding battle. It's been a work in progress for the Bucks. They should win this game. Given we expect to have Giannis and Damian Lillard on the floor, how that duo has looked of late. Where it could be problematic is if we see one of those, man, the Pistons got 23 offensive rebounds and turn that into 20 second chance points, or if the Bucks are turning the ball over because the Pistons, like we mentioned, don't force a lot. That's where things could start to get off the rails as that leads to those second chance opportunities. So if you just play the way that we've seen the Bucks playing recently, they should win this game, all things considered.
They should. And this is a Pistons team as well that's looking like it's pretty healthy. Like we've seen Cade Cunningham in and out the lineup over the last couple of weeks as well, dealing with, I believe it was a back injury for him. And he's healthy. Looks like they have their full squad good to go for this game tonight in Detroit. So it's not going to be easy. Cade Cunningham is somebody who I think the structure of the team this year makes a lot more sense around Cade, where you have your shooters. Malik Beasley, I'm sure, is going to look to get some level of revenge against the Bucks in this game as well. He played well in the first matchup against the Bucks as well. So it should be one of those games where for Detroit, you're fully healthy, you're coming in with something to play for. And for the Bucks, you're trying to get to Vegas because, again, they came into the season with different expectations. The Bucks came in thinking championship contender. We're trying to get here, woo-woo. The way the season started, not the best start for the Bucks. And I think for them too, this NBA Cup, if they can win this game against Detroit, punch their ticket in. I mean, there are ways they can as a wild card, not as likely if the Magic win, but we can get into scenarios a bit later. But for this Bucks team, a chance to go to Vegas in the middle of the season, a chance to be playing for something after the start that they had, I think means a lot for them as well, because it's a time they can bond you, as well as give some of the younger guys who weren't as big of the rotation a chance to kind of experience that high stakes basketball. Even though we saw AJ Green, we saw Andre Jackson Jr. get some minutes in that Pacers series last year. Just another opportunity this season in a different role to kind of see what that feels like when, it was a bit more expectation and responsibilities on your shoulders as well.
Yeah. And, another area I think to keep an eye on is how the Bucks continue to progress with their transition defense. The Pistons don't get in transition a whole lot. When they do, they're okay at it. So it's kind of the inverse of the Bucks in that they do give up a lot of transition opportunities, but they've gotten a lot better where they're right around middle of the pack. And that's been the story of the Pistons transition offense. They don't get there a lot, but when they do, they're right around the middle of the pack. They're just so in the half court. And that's where the Bucks have really excelled so far this season, defensively, at least with their half court defense. So just, again, don't be a disaster on the glass. Protect the basketball. And if you can get into transition against this Pistons team, you're going to be able to find some success. And Giannis is probably the most lethal transition player offensively in the history of this league. So I think we've kind of poured over a lot of this leading up to the game, and we've obviously seen the Pistons, so it's not a full-on scout and previewing what this team is going to bring. I do want to get into the other scenarios. We've touched on this briefly and how the Bucks could still reach the quarterfinals even if they lose tonight. But also, I want to touch on Khris Middleton. He gave a very brief discussion. I don't know if I'd even call it an interview with Jim Owczarski of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinels. We've seen a few questions popping up there of what's going on with Khris Middleton. We saw the report from Shams Charania. He was cleared about a month ago. So obviously that's going to lead to some concern and consternation. So Khris Middleton kind of shined a light on that. We'll get into that conversation coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. Well, this next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Prize Picks, and Prize Picks, one of the easiest and most simple ways to get in on the action, whatever it is you're looking at. You can win more than 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. They put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. They now offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up now today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that lead to big payouts, like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday, including today. Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineup. So Prize Picks, as I mentioned, very easy to get in on and use. Here's how it works. You think Steph Curry is going to hit more than 5 3-pointers next week? Maybe you think Giannis is going to score more than 30 points. You can even cook up some of those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. More than or less than. The best way to win real money this basketball season. Again, use that code, download the Prize Picks app to get your $50 instantly when you play $5 here. The code is Locked On NBA. Download the app and use that code to get your $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Locked On NBA, the code to use. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's talk now about Game Time. I've mentioned my experience with Game Time when I was on the road looking for tickets to multiple events and how easy the experience is. So easy when you're in an unfamiliar territory, even easier when you're in an arena or stadium that you know very well. But it offers so many features that are great for first-time users. You can see a panoramic view from your seat within the app if you want to know what your viewing experience is going to be like. You can toggle on the all-in pricing feature that shows you the total upfront cost with no surprise fees at checkout. Lowest price is guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And best of all, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Okay, so a few questions that came in the live chat too about the Pistons. I think you mentioned that, Camille. Nothing on the injury report for the Detroit Pistons. They're healthy. Just their G League guys on two-way deals that are going to be missing this game. So there's that. The Bucks relatively healthy as well. The one exception there, obviously, Khris Middleton. So I've seen a lot of this discussion too and that was kind of the dread when you saw the report from Shams Charania of, oh man, I know what this is going to do, especially for those that are already a little on edge about the Khris Middleton situation. But yes, he was physically cleared a couple weeks ago, and he's still not returned to the floor. He spoke with Jim Owczarski of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and, said he gets it. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for him as well. It has taken more time for him to get back than he anticipated. But I think the big thing was, he mentioned in that, whatever you want to call it, discussion, I had surgery on an ankle. I had surgery on 2 ankles. It takes time. I am obviously pretty close to the level of athlete that Khris Middleton and the rest of the Milwaukee Bucks are. I've had ankle surgery before, Camille, and I've been cleared to resume normal physical activities. It took much more time than when I was cleared to do that. Part of it is a mental thing when you think about the weight that your ankles carry and thinking, can I really trust this? But it just takes time when you're laid up and, it's not for months that Khris Middleton is not going to be out there walking. We've seen him obviously on the sidelines and on the court, but it's an onboarding process. It's a ramp up to it. And part of it is a mental thing, but part of it is ankle rehab is no joke. It takes longer than you think because of how important your ankles are. So I think that's a big piece of what we're seeing with Khris Middleton. The fact that, again, it wasn't just one ankle, it was 2 that he had surgically repaired. But the other thing is this, and I think Khris kind of either outright said this or at least hinted at it when he talked with Eric Name. You look at what's going on in Philadelphia, and it's not to single out the 76ers or Joel Embiid, but you just look at that situation where you come back and then you're dealing with something else. And maybe not necessarily you weren't ready to come back, but let's just wait until I know. I've gone a couple of days where there's absolutely nothing there. If this was a playoff game, could I play? Sure, but it's not. It's a regular season game. So rather than coming back, playing 2 or 3 games, and then, man, my ankle's swollen or it's kind of sore, I got to sit out the next game or two. Let's just wait until all of that is behind me. And I feel like there is going to be no start stops here. I mean, we saw that last year when he came back, and then before you knew it, a couple of weeks, and then Khris Middleton was out again. So the goal is to avoid that. And, we talked before the season about, is there a date on the calendar where you're officially worried for Khris Middleton? Yeah. I don't think either of us really had an answer. It was just, I'll know when I see it, but I couldn't give you a date as of this moment. I still don't really have. I mean, look, my date is April 14th or whatever the end of the regular season is. If we don't see him by then yeah, it's big time worries. I mean, obviously before that, sure, but I'm not there yet, is the long and short of it. And I think the other helpful part of it is, does it make you reevaluate what you're going to lean on him for? Probably, but this team has started to figure it out. So that's the other benefit of, you don't feel that urgency to say, hey, man, you were cleared. I know you said you feel about 80%. Let's just go with it, because it was going down a path where we were maybe looking at that, not so much the organization pressuring him, but Khris Middleton feeling that internal pressure, and also viewing him as the savior when this team was 2-8. Now that's gone. So I think you have even more of an opportunity to say, whenever you feel healthy, like, provided, let's hope that's not post All-Star break, but whenever you feel healthy, great. Then we'll get you back out there and work in.
I don't think that there's anyone as frustrated about this situation than Khris Middleton is. Like, you don't open the season up thinking that, I'm going to be playing soon. And then you give this interview with The Athletic talking to Eric Name of like, hey, for me, a season is successful when I get to play at least 70 games. Like, I'm not here to, miss all these games. Like, I want to play. Like, he set his intentions very clear ahead of the season of what he considers to be a successful season, what he's looking to do. And here we are, it's December 3rd as we record this, and Khris Middleton has not taken the court yet. So of course there's going to be some frustration from Bucks fans, but there's going to be a lot from Khris Middleton as well. Like, he wants to play. And if there's any good thing that has come out of the injuries over the last few years from Khris, it's just the fact that Khris feels very comfortable with his body and understands when he can push and when he needs to listen. And at this point, although he has been medically cleared, Khris feels that his body, like, I'm just not quite there yet. And for the Bucks, you don't want it to be a situation where you bring Khris back too early. He plays for a little bit, then he has to sit for a week or two because something didn't happen right during the ramp up period. You want to try to make sure that when he comes back, you're able to plan around his minutes. And if it's a thing where he comes back and he has to slow roll himself into the rotation, where he's starting off playing 15, 20 minutes a game until you gradually build that up, as a team, you can plan for that. You can plan around, okay, we're going to have Khris for 15, 20 minutes. What's harder to plan around is when you think you're going to have a guy and then he's out for weeks. We've heard this team talk about waiting to install certain things until Khris Middleton comes back, because he's such a linchpin of what they're looking to do rotationally as well. And for this team, as you mentioned, we talked before the season, like, when's the time frame where you're going to feel a little bit nervous about Khris coming back? And my refrain has been like, we need Khris for the playoffs. We need him to be healthy for the playoffs. But what I will add too is that you need some runway into that. Like, you want to see him get as many games played with Giannis, with Dame, with this group as possible, because they are installing, they are figuring out how to play with one another, learning some different schemes. So you want to get as much on-court time as possible. But I'm not going to try to force that on-court time at the expense of his health going forward. So, like, yeah, frustrating, disappointing, whatever word you want to use there, for sure, with how long this has taken, given the reports we heard to start the season and the off season and what that timeline initially looked like. But at the end of the day, if Khris comes back and he's ready to go, he's healthy, I don't really care how long it took. I just want to see him get back on the court, be able to build some chemistry, be able to build just that camaraderie with the guys on the court, and go from there.
Well, was it, I mean, I can't even keep it straight anymore, partially because it's one of those numbers that you don't want to reference, but was it 6 games total with Doc Rivers, something like that, that
Like
Khris,
6 or 7 with
Giannis,
all three of them.
like parts of 6 games. Cause, but yeah, I mean, to your point, things are a little bit different this year, offensively and especially defensively. So yeah, I mean, I joke of just come back before the playoffs, but you would like more of a runway for that group to play together. And I think what we've seen early in the season is Doc Rivers figuring out rotations and figuring out who works with who. So seeing some more of that as well. A few comments that we see in the chat here about some of the injuries that the Bucks are dealing with. I do want to get to that, but as we mentioned, they can still reach the quarterfinals if they lose. So the scenarios in play for that, we will dig into that coming up after this here on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is sponsored by BetterHelp. We just moved past one big holiday, but we're still in the holiday season. A very festive and happy time for most of us. A cozy time when you think about the winter weather that has suddenly made its way into Wisconsin. And when you think about that cozy feeling, therapy is a great way to enhance that and give you that comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Okay, so a few comments. Let's address a few of these that are starting to come in. It is not possible that Khris Middleton is demanding a trade. I see that question being asked, but here's a good one. If they are not going to play Ryan Rollins, let him get the surgery. So Doc Rivers kind of spoke about this a couple of games ago when we heard that, Rollins had two options and he was going to decide to give it a go. And Doc said to get the surgery, that would be tough for him at this point in his career and what we've started to see. But he also said, I believe it was, maybe it was after the Wizards game, but one of the more recent games that, we heard Ryan Rollins was cleared and available to play. He has not played since. Well, Doc said, look, DeLon Wright's been playing pretty well, and he has moved back in front of Ryan Rollins. So the reason why Ryan Rollins would not get the surgery is you're closing the book on his season in all likelihood, if that happens. And DeLon Wright has moved in front of him now. Injuries happen. Other things happen. You'd still love to have him available, and it's probably a good thing, too, that he's going to gut it out through this, but you don't need him right now, and you can give it more time where it's not being used. So why he wouldn't have the surgery? Because of that. It leaves the door open for something else happens. If DeLon Wright struggles, if anybody struggles, and there's a spot that's open in the rotation, we have Ryan Rollins that we can turn to. If he gets the surgery, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, then it's not an option at all anymore. But I understand. I think it was Dennis who had the comment about Rollins coming up there. And I get it, because what we saw from Rollins in his last few games before he got injured, it was really interesting of like, oh, we might have something here with this guard that can play defense the way that he does with this long wingspan. Yeah. He had a little shooting touch. Like you could see the potential in his play. And it was like, this could be exciting. And he was elevated at that point to backup point guard for the Milwaukee Bucks. Even started the game with the injuries that hit, to your point about how injuries can affect the rotation here. So I definitely get it. And I've been wondering the same thing. So when Doc cleared that up of just saying, hey, the way the rotation is gone, he's just not in it right now. I can get why he's still like, well, I'm not getting the surgery. I'm going to keep, grinding through it, getting my reps in, understanding the play. Maybe look at that in the offseason and come back next season ready for a different role. But for Rollins, I'm with Dennis. Like I would love to see him on the court more, but the team doesn't necessarily need him right now, which I think is a positive for this Bucks team, because there was a second there where it looked like he was going to be needed to play for this team to turn some things around.
And I mean, it's also a much different story if this is like a Cade Cunningham we're talking about. If Ryan Rollins is a lottery pick where I'm a big part going forward, get the surgery because your spot is safe, but not to say that he's unsafe, but he had to grind to get here. And he still has to carve out a spot in the rotation and still wants to find those opportunities. And the Bucks would also like to see, while we like what we've seen behind the scenes in practice and everything else, let's see more of a sample size of this from Ryan Rollins. For those listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to follow along to this. So apologies here, but let's just file this one away and remember this comment when we get to the end of the year and the playoff time. And let's, how soon we forget that the Bucks had a chance, the underhanded Bucks had a chance to beat the Indiana Pacers in the first round solely because of Khris Middleton.
For those on the audio side, really quick, the comment was just that Khris is not worth the investment.
I didn't even want to give it the time of day, Camille. For another one here, why is Khris Livingston not getting playing time? Hey, you and me both, brother. No, your mix has been pretty good so far with Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez and Giannis. And Doc has even said, and I think this is only going to increase when Khris is back on the floor, he's outright said a couple of times and certainly strongly hinted at they want to play small a lot more with some of the mix of guys that they have. So unfortunately for Khris Livingston, he's just going to be the odd man out there in terms of getting those same types of opportunities. We're not saying start and play heavy minutes, but like the opportunities that we saw to go to Ryan Rollins and some of the young guys that get a little sliver of minutes, carve out the most that you can with it, and you're going to stick in the rotation. So, and another one too, comparing the health of Khris Middleton to the health of Giannis and how much the Bucks are protecting them. I mean, look, I'm not going to compare anyone's health to Giannis. As we have seen through the years, he is superhuman in terms of his physicality and what he can bounce back from. We all thought there's no chance he's playing in the finals, and he's probably out for all of the next season in the conference finals after that knee injury to the Hawks, and he's back 10 days later and wins the finals MVP and brings the Bucks their second championship. So I get it on the surface, but there is no comparison to Giannis. And I think we've seen the Bucks protect Giannis as much as they can and his health. Mentioned there are scenarios for the Bucks to still make the quarterfinals, even if they lose to the Detroit Pistons tonight. I believe we kind of touched on this on yesterday's show, but it basically comes down to this, Camille. If you want to get in as the wild card, or if you hope to get in as a wild card, you don't want to be the wild card.
Right. You want to win the group outright.
The Orlando Magic need to win tonight in New York against the Knicks. And we say that because the first tiebreaker is point differential. So if the Knicks lose, they cannot be the wild card because the Celtics are done at 3-1, and the Celtics have a plus 23 point differential. The Knicks are 3-0. They have a plus 15 point differential. So even if they lose and are tied with the Celtics and whoever loses between the Bucks and the Pistons, if you lose, your point differential is going to go down, and they're already behind the Celtics. So the Knicks have no chance at the wild card. The Magic are plus 60, which is
no catching Magic.
The highest of any team in Cup play. So let's do the quick math here. Let's say the Bucks lose. Even if you would have to, number one, lose by less than 5 points to stay in front of the Boston Celtics. So you'd need a 4-point loss, a 5-point loss, 5 points or less. And that would put you at a minus or a plus 24 point differential. So you would still be 3-1 and you would finish in front of the Boston Celtics. In that scenario, you would need the Orlando Magic to lose by 35 points to finish, or 36 points actually, to finish in front of the Orlando Magic. So if you want the wild card, or if you hope for a chance to get in with a loss, you need the Magic to beat the Knicks. And look, like we mentioned with the point differential, they've done very well. I think skeptics would point out the Magic have been very hot too. They're along with the Bucks, have won 6 in a row, and they're doing this without Paolo Banchero. How do they get to that plus 60? Well, kind of similar to what we saw the Bucks last year when they rolled through group play. They blew out the Hornets. They blew out the Sixers without their key guys. They blew out the Brooklyn Nets. So this is the first quote-unquote test in group play for the Orlando Magic. So if the Magic win the game, like we said, if you lose by 5 points or less, you will be the wild card if you're the Bucks.
And I know there are some people out there who are like, I thought this NBA Cup thing was easy. Like, what are you talking about? All these different scenarios. What do you mean? But we're just running through situations in case the Bucks lose to the Pistons tonight, of what it would take for them to continue on through the NBA Cup, be a wild card team, and have a chance to play to go to Vegas. So the easiest pathway, of course, as we said, just win the game against Detroit. Win your group. You don't have to worry about point differential. You are 4-0 in your group play. You've won your group. You have punched your ticket on to the next round. But if you do happen to lose, then things get a little bit wonky there. So if you're a Bucks fan and you're hoping to see the Bucks continue on NBA play, regardless of what happens in this Bucks Pistons game, cheer for the Magic tonight, which feels counterintuitive because like the standing race and you're trying to catch up to the Magic. But if you're looking at the NBA Cup and you want to see the Bucks there in Vegas, Magic have to win necessarily. Well, don't have to. Things can happen if they don't. The cleanest way is for the Magic to win if the Bucks lose. Otherwise, just Bucks take care of business, win your game. It doesn't matter what happens with the Magic at that point. So it's going to be a lot to play for in the Brandon Jennings Khris Middleton Bowl,
Brandon Knight,
Carlos Delfino, Greg Monroe. There's quite a few names there that, you know,
Beasley.
Right. John Henson for a little bit there as well. So there's going to be some things at stake for this game for sure. And again, as we mentioned at the beginning, the Pistons are going to be ready for this game coming out to play. We saw how Isaiah Stewart was so amped up for that Giannis matchup in the last time that these two teams faced off. I can only imagine Beef Stew with the battery in his back with the crowd, the NBA Cup ready for this matchup.
So in all likelihood, if the Knicks and Pistons win, your foursome in the East is the Knicks, the Magic, the Pistons, and the Atlanta Hawks. Like, how about that? And that's the other interesting thing is, on the radio show that I do, I have a few callers that don't like the NBA Cup or confused by it, think it's stupid, and would rather let's just not play in it and let's get the rest. So you have to explain, well, number one, you don't get rest.
Right.
You only have 80 games scheduled. So you're still playing 2 games, whether it's in the cup or not. And then it drifts to, great, well, then let's just play 2 games against lesser teams that didn't qualify for the quarterfinals. Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers didn't qualify for the quarterfinals. In the scenario we just outlined, the Boston Celtics wouldn't qualify for the quarterfinals. Right. The Heat haven't qualified for the quarterfinals. The Sixers didn't qualify for the quarterfinals. I know they've struggled all year, but you know, by the time you make up those games in a week, maybe Joel Embiid is playing. Like, there are still some landmines out there. It's not like you're just getting the Wizards and the Brooklyn Nets, who I know you'll see this weekend and already beat the Bucks, but you're not getting those teams necessarily. And that to me is what has been one of the more fascinating parts of the Cup this year is who had the Atlanta Hawks winning Group C in a group that included the Celtics and Cavs. The Chicago Bulls, by the way, had a chance to win it in a close game against the Celtics. If they would have won that game, the Bulls, by way of tiebreakers, would have been the representative in Group C. We all thought the Sixers coming into the season were going to win Group A. That's not the case. In the Western Conference, San Antonio Spurs are in a pretty good spot to win Group B. They got the game with Phoenix tonight. Golden State Warriors already clinched. They've been a great story so far this season. The Rockets clinched, but teams like the Blazers are alive for one of the wild card spots. So to me, you can say I don't get it and everything else. And I do think the league has done, you know, a decent enough job of giving clarity there where you have the courts to differentiate. Okay, this is an NBA Cup game. One of the big pushbacks I've heard from others is, well, why didn't the first game the Bucks played against the Pistons count as a group play game? And again, I think they've outlined Tuesdays and Fridays when you see this court, that's when it's a cup game. But I think one of the bigger stories to come from this is, you know, we've seen parity the last year plus now, and part of that is the CBA and everything else that the commissioner has done to try and give everyone a chance to say, we don't want the days of the 80s, 90s, early, even 2010s, when it was every year 3 teams had a chance to win the title. We want to move away from that. What this is doing, and you know, especially if we get a scenario like the Magic, Pistons, Knicks, and Hawks as your foursome in the East, it is just putting teams that don't usually get that attention on a larger stage and introducing you to their players and trying to cultivate and build new stars.
And that's why I love the NBA Cup. Like when it was announced, I was a little skeptical of like, what does this mean? I don't watch soccer. I don't understand the group play and regulations and all this other stuff. But seeing the different teams that are getting a chance to, make it through, be advertised by the league, be on primetime TV for the league. I think that's really fun aspect of it, because in the NBA, you have your best of 7 series. More times than not, a majority of the time, except for maybe a handful of injuries have a role in it, the best team is going to win in the series of 7 games. Like, it's just going to average out that way. But when you have a tournament like this where there's knockout rounds, it's one game and you move on or not. It gives you that March Madness feel to it, that idea of like anything could happen here. And that aspect of it, I think, is really fun, especially seeing when it's a mix of teams you expect to be competing for something, even if you don't know what it is, but just a team you expect to compete against a team like the Blazers, where it was like they were expected to compete just for lottery standings, and they're going to get a chance possibly to be on the stage and show what some of these young players can do. Some young players who might in a couple of years be, a face of that franchise. So I love just the mix. I love the March Madness feel to it. I even like the courts, even the ugly ones. I like the courts. I like being able to turn the TV on and see this is something different tonight. So all in all, my final thought on that would just be, I'm here for the NBA Cup. I'm looking forward to the games tonight. I hope the Bucks get a win. But I think it's good for the league to have this nice mix and also have like this chaotic March Madness vibe to the season.
Yeah, and last year, not quite to the level we could potentially see this year. I mean, in the East, it was pretty close to chalk when you had the Bucks, the Knicks, and what they went on to do a year ago, the Celtics. The Pacers, obviously the biggest revelation to come from that tournament. So the East was pretty stacked with the teams that you would expect to see there in the West. The Lakers took it very seriously as we saw LeBron James' performance. The Phoenix Suns early on, a much different story. They were in there as well. Kings and Pelicans, I think the forgotten game in the quarterfinals between the other two teams, and New Orleans even reaching the semifinals. So a little bit of a mix last year, but this year could be one of those. And I'm curious to see, it's the same conversation we have a lot of times with the NCAA tournament. What is that going to do for the ratings? Like, do you need the stars? Do you need the Celtics? Do you need the Lakers? Do you need your superstars in there? Or is there going to be more intrigue because, number one, they've changed out the timing of these games. 2, that it's not the random Thursday and Saturday, that it's going to end on a Tuesday, I believe it is. But is it going to be more of a draw when you see the underdogs that are reaching it? If you have a semifinals that's Pistons Hawks, is that going to be something that's drawing the attention, or is it just going to be completely glossed over? But we'll be able to start to figure things out. We'll know what the bracket is going to be tonight by the time we get into the post-game show, at least on the Eastern Conference side, and who those 4 teams advancing are, if the Bucks are one of those 4 teams for the second consecutive year and can get to 8-0 in group play in NBA Cup history. It'll be Frank and myself handling the post-game duties tonight, hopefully recapping a Bucks win, or at least a loss by 5 or less points, and an Orlando Magic win to advance into the quarterfinals. That'll do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.